Greetings and salutations, world. This is Rob Kandell, Tuff Love. April 6, 2017. Thank you so much for being on the show. I am thrilled to have you all on. Excited to see what happens about this very interesting topic, the concept of the male ego, which I'm sure everyone on this show listening live and also downloading can probably get a feel for. They've dealt with the male ego, our own, our fathers, our friends, etc., etc. So I'm really excited to talk about this show. Before I start, I do also want to announce that I am excited that I'm going to Las Vegas this weekend to engage in the Hay House Book Conference, where I'm going to learn how to publish or self-publish a book. The book, of course, is called Tuff Love, and it's about my experiences. All the podcasts are being put into one book, and there's just something exciting about announcing that, because on some level, believe it or not, I am shy. You know, I was born shy, I was raised shy, and at the same time, it's really is time for all of us to step up, myself included, to say that we are badasses. We are big, bad, awesome, incredible badasses. And I want to start off the show. I actually, wrote down a bunch of things I want to say, but I want to talk about that first concept, is that I am a very healthy male with a very healthy, large ego. And I think, in my non-humble opinion, that my ego serves me well and the universe well, because I've worked on it. Now, throughout my life, I've not had such a strong ego. And I want to get that point across first and foremost, that I had a lot of negative viewpoints about myself growing up. I was an overweight kid. I had a very low self-esteem when I started. I used a lot of techniques and tactics to look for external approval, to improve my ego. There's always been this sort of chase to like myself on some level, not love myself, just like myself or accept myself. So I think a lot of people live in this world where they don't even like themselves. They don't even think that they're badasses. And I think that's the first step of this talk, is if you're in that place where you are not in love with yourself, if you're not crushed on yourself of who you are, that might just be something to look at. That might be something to explore, because to move around in this world in a healthy manner is extremely important. Because if you don't have a strong ego, then you're looking externally. When you're looking externally, that's where everything fucked up begins. Because on some level, you're actually looking for external sources to feel good about yourself. So that is the first piece. The second piece is I want to explain how this show happened. I was in bed with Morgan maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and we were touching and enjoying, and it was a good time had by all. And then she said, most men really don't know how to touch. Most men don't really know, how to do what you do. And she's like, why don't you teach men how to touch anymore? And so for my history, for those who don't know, I co-founded an organization called One Taste. One Taste taught a practice called orgasmic meditation. Orgasmic meditation is taking the most dexterous part of the human body, the index finger, and stroking the most sensitive part of a woman's body, her clitoris, up, down for 15 minutes. And when I started, I was a bumbling idiot when it came to it, all over the place. And through really 14, 15 years of practice, 11,000 ohms, I learned to touch. And during that tenure, I taught many, many thousands of people to touch, half of them men, half of them women, or whatever that percentage is. And I've taught and seen more undeliberate touch in this lifetime than I think I would like to see. I've seen more, that cringing thing when you notice someone touching another and you're just like, oh my God, that must be awful for the other person. It's awful for me watching. It just must be heinous for them to have that experience. But me, I'm watching, I'm just like, why don't you go a little lighter? Why don't you go a little lighter? You're doing great. Now, okay, go, at some point I just want to slap them. And I want to just like, stop touching so hard. Just slow the fuck down. What are you doing? And, and then I have to be like, and, the man has an ego. And through many experiences, I had to be like, okay, let me show you. And I would actually move their finger for them. Anyway, the point is that I've had many, many experiences of watching a man touch a woman that made my soul cringe. It just hurt. It just hurt inside. It deeply hurt. Okay, so we're in bed, back to current time, and she's like, why don't you teach men to touch anymore? You should teach what the skill set you have because men need this. And the first thing that came out of my mouth was, I was a little dramatic. And sometimes it happens with Morgan. I get a little dramatic. I'm like, do you understand a man's ego and how challenging it is to teach a man to touch? Do you get the depth of challenge that is for me to do? So that was the first thing I said. And she said, laughed and said, okay, and number 2. And now I'm like on my soapbox. I'm like, naked on top of a box. Number 2. The second thing is that women refuse to tell men the truth when they're touching inappropriately. And so it's women like you. No, I didn't really say that, but I thought that. I was just like, it's things like this that have caused this indeliberate touch in men. That's the second thing. And then when the woman doesn't tell the man the truth, the third thing is the man thinks, I got this handled. She's not saying a thing. Like when it should just be soft and tender. And the man's ego gets reinforced by the woman not telling the truth. And then what happens is the woman just gets less and less interested in telling the men's truth. And then we have a society of undeliberate touch happening in this world. So I will admit that the original title of this podcast is Why I Don't Teach Men to Touch Anymore. That was the original title Morgan and I got. But I figured if I did that, no one would listen. And so I had to kind of sugarcoat it and, pull the lens back into the man's ego, which really it's about. So anyway, that is the thing. So men are a pain in the ass. And I really want to admit for the record is I was one of those men. And when I started my training, thank God for the patience of my teachers and the women around me to say, slow the fuck down, stop pushing so hard, get out of your head, and pay attention to me. That's what I had to go through for my transformation. Okay, so we're all in the same boat. I hope I'm not coming across as an arrogant, thinking I'm better than, because I wasn't. But the point is that for men to learn to touch, for men to learn to pay attention to a woman has a large effect, or that is possible only by his willingness to bend and mold and morph his ego to learn to pay attention. So, segue into what is ego. And I did a little research on ego, and I thought this was interesting. I did not know this. Ego in Latin means I. So the very basis of the concept of ego is that it's I, it's me, which made total sense. This, of course, was coined by Freud in his reality principle. There's a whole bunch on Wikipedia you can check out. It's really cool. And the ego, for those who don't remember your high school biology, the ego is the mediator between the superego and the id. The superego is the conscious ideal person, the godlike Rob, and the id is the one that's satisfying the basic needs, the deviant Rob. And so the ego is the person that says, like, no, I don't think you should do that, or you should do that. It's the one really holding the conversation. So a strong, healthy ego is one who really knows when to let the superego run the show or when the id to run the show. Okay, so that's the history around it. In doing more research, I then found that in terms of ego, gender role, of course, plays a very huge part in how healthy the ego is. And the thing I want to say is, as I've said on many other shows, is the world is changing in terms of gender roles. And I think this is a big piece of what's happening with men's ego, is that in the change, we don't quite know who we are. In writing the book, the last chapter, I went back to a podcast I did on what men want. And the first thing I said was that men want to know their place in the world. And I think that's a really important piece. We want to know where we stand. We want to know what our purpose is. We want to know why the fuck to get out of bed and do the things we do. We want to know our place in the world. And in this very rapidly changing world of gender roles, it gets harder and harder for us to know who we are. And in response, the male ego to the ever-changing gender role is that we are scared, but because our gender role does not allow us to be scared, then we're actually arrogant, forceful, sometimes cruel, undeliberate. So it's because of the change of society. I'm not saying that there hasn't been this all along, but it's been my impression that it's getting more and more intense for a man to know who they are in the world. And in doing so, the ego is acting out more and more in their id, in their satisfying their own needs, than in their superego being the best version of ourselves. Men are taught as part of our gender roles to be very, one, stoic, and two, suppress our emotions. Now, this is changing with this generation called the millennials. There's a lot more feminine males. There's a lot more permission for millennials to embrace their femininity, to embrace that feminine side of themselves, which causes other problems we'll get to in a little bit. But what's happening is because the male ego is taught to be stoic and suppress our emotions, men don't cry sort of thing, that we're getting kind of messed up. So the male ego has been described as fragile. And I think this is actually a true statement. At the same time that we're supposed to be strong, Paul Bunyan, John Wayne kind of, powerhouses, we're actually quite fragile. And guess who is my favorite example for a fragile male ego? He is the President of the United States, the leader of the free world. Isn't that a scary part? The most powerful man in the world is the man with one of the most fragile egos I've ever witnessed in my entire life. And this kind of spooks me. This is the reason we're thinking about Costa Rica. This is the reason I've got one eye on every news report that's going on, because we're running the show. The man running a show is a man with a really fragile, tender ego who, as soon as it's poked, pushes back hard and lies and confuses. So as much as I think this should be irrelevant, it actually is extremely irrelevant. So guess what? Because the man at the top has a fragile ego, it's going to go all the way down to the bottom of the chain, to every single aspect. People growing up is going to be in the world of the Trump. And that's a really important piece, is for us to notice that in this ever-changing world, we're led by a man with a fragile, conceited ego. So what do we do? And I think the first thing that has to happen is that we all just have to acknowledge that this is happening. One, that the world is changing. Two, that men don't know their place in the world. Three, that their egos are in a twist. Their panties are in a twist. And what's happening is that we have to actually open up the space for the man's ego to be seen and held and considered. The only way I think really to change someone is to hold them and contain them and offer them comfort and say you're doing it right. And in doing it right, you can do it better and better and better. Okay, so before I go to ways to handle a male ego, I want to talk about some of the dangers. And I've been talking to women, my entire career, and Morgan has really been a huge inspiration and a source of information. But here's some of the dangers of a fragile male ego. One is men won't take a no. And this happens a lot, is that men, for some reason, think no is a reason to increase the sensation, the intensity of the game. And, we've heard no versus no since the 70s. We hear this a lot in consent and rape culture and all these things. But there is some part of a major danger of the male ego is that it has a lot of trouble saying a no. Now, my modification to it is a no means a no, but a no can change to a maybe or a yes somewhere down the line, if you're not an idiot. If you're an idiot, that no will probably remain a no. But if you actually take the no graciously and with humor and okay, then that no somewhere down the line might actually turn into a yes, and you actually might get what you want. Morgan was talking about how men, really just with her body will just like keep going even though they say no. And that disturbs the fuck out of me, because it's true, and I've seen it. I've seen it in how people handle her and how people look at her. And it really bugs me. And so the first thing is just to know, no is not a rejection of you. The old saying from Morehouse, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting the offer. The ability to say that, okay, this offer that I gave for a makeout, a date, an experience, whatever it is not what she wanted. I can come back and offer something else somewhere down the line with which she might say yes. But for some reason, we take no as a rejection of ourself. And so every aspect of every no I've gotten, I've learned to be like, okay, that offer was not on the mark. That offer was not pristine. And I'm talking not just in personal relationships, in business. I was talking to this guy in Thailand, talking to this guy about Thailand about doing some consulting work for him. And I made the offer and he basically said no. And he says, if you want feedback, In short, your offer kind of sucked and you didn't do the legwork. And I was like, the first, I could feel that knife going into my gut. And then I was like, that's okay. I can learn from that. I can actually take his information, expand, and not do that same offer again in the future. It was actually a really valuable thing. But a lot of fragile male egos will just take the no and say, fuck you, rather than, okay, what can I learn from this? Men's egos also have a sense of entitlement. They think that they deserve or should, or just because they are who they are in the world, or they provide, or they take someone out to dinner, or say something nice, that there's something they should respond back. No, it's not like that. We do not live in a commerce-based world. Well, we live in a commerce-based world, but you should know not to add to the commerce-based world. If you do something nice for a person, do it for your own pleasure, not for some result. Don't give to get. Give to give. Give so you can feel that desire and power in yourself of your ability to produce. That is a powerful thing to do. Another danger is compensation. A male ego, if they're feeling sad or weak or curious or something inept inside of them, the male ego will often compensate by being brash and rude and arrogant and taking. So watch for the danger of compensation. And the last thing is really to be careful from the males tend to detach from their ego, from their emotions, which will have them live inside their ego. Be careful, like of a man because I can't feel my sadness or my fear, I'm then going to act like I'm going to puff my wings up and I'm going to just kind of slap everything around. I'd hit the microphone now if it makes sense. But it was just be careful to watch that. So this has been a pretty down, pessimistic podcast so far. But don't worry. In the last 4 minutes, we have ways to handle the male ego. And then my friend Lion, who hopefully is that 206 number, is going to come on and we're going to talk about his male ego. Okay, ways to handle a male ego. And this is what's been done with me, which I'm totally grateful for. And Morgan, again, is really good at handling my ego and understanding what's happening and offering a space for me to come out and find my balance again. So first and foremost, curiosity. When a man is in his ego acting undeliberately or inappropriately from your viewpoint, get curious into what's happening, what's motivating him to be in that spot where he's not on the mark. Get into his world a little bit, think a little bit, feel into it, wonder about it, ask some questions. What has you feeling this way? What happened today? Really get curious. The greatest thing you can do is just sit down and put your attention on them so they can feel seen and heard and considered. Patience. A lot of patience. Let's say that word again slowly so it goes into your brains. Patience, especially around things, around touching. I was like a energetic bull in a china shop when I learned my orgasmic meditation practice. It was a long time, 6 months to be honest, before I learned to stroke deliberately. That was a very long time hanging out with a lot of patient women. Your ability to be patient and say like, okay, I know you're moving in the right direction. That's really helpful for a man, for him to feel your ability to stay with him through some rough times. Empathize, really get into their world, understand what he's feeling. And here's the thing that most people will not do that I talked about in the beginning of the show is tell the truth. When you lie, you fuck over a man like nothing else. And most women I know are lying a lot to their men. This is the greatest crime you can do, because guess what? Every single time you lie, he wants to believe it. His ego gets pumped up and he gets more into his ego. Now, I'm not saying you have to tell the truth always in the exact moment, though I do recommend it. But, Morgan and I had an experience on Saturday night. She told me about it on Tuesday night. It was not easy to hear. We got into one of our heated discussions, our rare heated discussion that lasted a day. But I am so grateful that she told me the truth. And I'm so grateful that she let me into her world to see how my actions didn't quite fit. Now, she had her stuff, I had my stuff. It doesn't matter what the details are. The main truth is that my partner will tell me the truth is the greatest gift she gives me every single day. And if you think he can't handle it, that's the lie you're telling yourself. It's not him unable to handle it. It's you, the woman, not able to handle his ego, which you can. So your ability to tell your partner the truth is the uber importance. It is the most important thing you can do, because then we all have a chance for us to see those parts of ourselves we can't see, to improve the parts that our partner wants, and for us to become better and better men, if a woman is willing to tell the truth. And that truth, I can tell you, is not easy to hear from a man, but wouldn't you rather know the truth than question, to have that little thought in the back of your mind? It kind of feels good, but then again, it kind of feels a little weird. That's the aspect I'm talking about. Acknowledge and approve is the final step. Be willing to say, I am so happy, my man, that even though this is challenging for you, you're willing to face it. And that is the greatest thing you can give a man, is to acknowledge him and approve of him. And remember, approving doesn't always mean liking the behavior, but you're still approving of the person in general. And that is the greatest gift you can give for a man, to move from his ego into connection with you and the world. And that, my friends, is this week's rant. Everybody, give me a little shake. Give me a little shake. Woo! That was fun. I had a good time.